Well, hello there and welcome to Nowhere to Hide. I have some good news today. Actually, two examples of good news, and it's nice to have this. We've needed a little bit of a break. The news that we're going to talk about today will pertain to Proposition 1, otherwise known as Idaho's Open Primaries Initiative, which is really about ranked choice voting. Something is taking place that you'll want to know about, and also the Pork Report is back, and I've got details coming up.
Press club or bias all media, newspaper, radio.
To be completely blunt here, Brian, and there are plans to expand
indoctrination.
That's right.
Idahoans are also concerned.
Horror shot. That line would be moving a little bit farther west.
I'm like crying.
Nobody wants to see
dark money is influencing policy in our state.
Well, that's not how this works.
Once again, welcome to Nowhere to Hide. Twice a week, we have the opportunity to sit down and go over some of the stories that get, shall we say, less than thorough coverage from the legacy media. Now, it's not that they're not being covered at all. It's just that there's kind of a one-sided slant to how you're supposed to think about these kind of things, when in fact there may be some nuance or maybe even an entirely different side to these issues that just somehow is omitted. So it's not that they're telling you bold-faced lies so much as the things that they're not telling you. And that's what we like to examine in some detail. You're probably hearing a lot now about ranked choice voting. Now, you might be hearing about it under the auspices of, oh, yes, Idaho's Proposition 1, the Open Primaries Initiative. And, I don't know if you've noticed this, but being an election year, there is a lot of chicanery going on, and it's so interesting to me. The Democratic Party, which ostensibly is the party that is there to defend our democracy, has thrown every caution to the wind, has dispensed with every bit of the democratic process, and instead will do some kind of a roll call vote on who they're going to nominate to be their presidential nominee. And, never mind those of you who voted in their primary, your votes don't count. And isn't that kind of the reasoning, though, that we're told, well, this is why, these closed Republican primaries in Idaho, we need an open primary so that everybody's vote will count. Same kind of people, same folks that are bringing you, the coronation of Kamala Harris as the presumptive nominee. But let's bring it back to Idaho. Something happened this last week, and this is actually encouraging news for those who are paying attention to such issues. I'll share this with you. It's from Attorney General Raul Labrador. His office filed a court challenge to the deceptively marketed ranked choice voting and top 4 primary ballot initiative. And when they say it's deceptively marketed, they're talking about it says one thing but does something different. In other words, it's not being entirely truthful with you about what this proposition purports to do. So from the press release, here's what the Attorney General's office had to say. Attorney General Raul Labrador filed a petition today, this was on the 24th, with the Idaho Supreme Court in a challenge to a ballot initiative that has been deceptively and inaccurately promoted as the Open Primary Initiative. Now, the petition for a writ of prohibition or a writ of mandate addresses 2 flaws with the initiative. And he goes into some detail as to what those are. So the first one is, despite a crystal clear prior ruling from the Idaho Supreme Court that the initiative does not propose an open primary, Idahoans for Open Primaries and its members systematically called it that to obtain the necessary signatures to support the initiative. It's the old bait and switch. They repeatedly described their initiative to citizens through their websites, signage, social media, trainings, canvassing efforts, and in interviews and statements that the proposed initiative would implement, quote, open primaries, when the Idaho Supreme Court ruled last year that the initiative does not describe an open primary system. So that's one big problem with the initiative. Second, the initiative makes distinct changes to the primary election and separately to the voting system used in the general election, which violates the single rule subject for legislation and initiatives. This initiative would eliminate party primaries and also institute a complex, multi-stage ranked choice voting system for the general election, involving multiple ballot counts and vote shifting between candidates that lacks basic transparency. Now, I know this is the point in time where a lot of people, well, if you're too stupid to count to 4, you really shouldn't be voting in the first place. But that's an attempt at sophistry to hide something which undeniably it complicates a system that should be very simple. One person, one vote. It's hard to beat the simplicity of that, but that's exactly what they're trying to do, because you can fudge with this system. You can make some things happen. We'll actually illustrate what that looks like in just a moment. Attorney General Raul Labrador says the so-called open primary initiative has nothing to do with open primaries, and thousands of Idahoans were misled into signing the petition by signature collectors who misrepresented the initiative. Last year, the Idaho Supreme Court refused to let the initiative sponsors call the initiative an open primary initiative and unambiguously ruled that the initiative does not propose an open primary system. Now, the sponsors have not only ignored the court's direction, they have snubbed their noses at the court's ruling, said Attorney General Labrador. The sponsors also buried ranked choice voting in the initiative and again misrepresented the initiative to voters. He says Idaho law does not allow such abuse of the initiative process. It's unacceptable and jeopardizes the integrity of the court's prior ruling and the initiative process itself. So kudos to Raul Labrador for standing up and saying, this isn't going to pass the sniff test. He says, as the petition explains, an open primary is what Idaho had before 2011, but the initiative and the old system have essentially nothing in common. Nevertheless, the initiative sponsors disregarded the court's ruling and sold the initiative as open primaries anyway. And by doing so, they violated Idaho Code subsection 34-1815 and voided the signatures supporting their initiative. So with the filing of this motion, the petition for a writ of prohibition or mandate requests the Idaho Supreme Court order the Idaho Secretary of State to reject the initiative on these grounds and disallow the initiative on the November ballot. Oh, I can just hear the howls from Reclaim Idaho and Idahoans for Open Primaries. How dare you not let us cheat? How dare you not let us game the system? But there's a lot at stake here. And frankly, once you see how this system is intended to work, if you're a thinking person, you'll be asking yourself, why would they want to muddy this up and complicate it in such a strange way? So let's talk a little bit about how it works, and we'll turn to Alaska to learn about this. Now, thanks to Senator Brian Lenny, who is a state senator here in Idaho. He says, Idaho is too smart for ranked choice voting. In the special election for Alaska's House seat in 2022, the state used ranked choice voting for the first time. Sarah Palin, a Republican, was one of the candidates running, and despite a majority of voters choosing a Republican candidate as their first choice, the ranked choice system had a different outcome. And here's how that played out. In the initial count, Republican candidates Sarah Palin and Nick Begich received more combined votes than Democratic candidate Mary Peltola. However, since no candidate received more than 50% of the vote in the first round, the ranked choice process came into play. And this is where it becomes trickery. In the final round, when Begich was eliminated, his votes were redistributed based on the second choices indicated by his voters. Now, many of Begich's voters did not choose Palin as their second choice. So as a result, Mary Peltola won the election after receiving enough of the redistributed votes to surpass 50%. In other words, those people who didn't indicate a second choice, their votes didn't count. And this shows that even though a majority of Alaskans initially voted for a Republican candidate, the ranked choice voting system allowed a Democrat candidate with second choice votes to, quote, win. That sound like a good, straightforward system to you? That sound like something that, it's self-explanatory. Why would it just occur to you as you're walking down the street? Not so. Take a look at this flow chart. And granted, it's hard to see with the fine print, but this is ranked choice voting. The simplest explanation is that some people get more than one vote. And I'm not going to go through the whole thing, but you can see Steve votes for candidate A, Sarah votes for candidate B, Lee voted for candidate C, Kim voted for candidate D. And then you have to go through this whole flow here. All right, this vote was still good. This one is still good. This vote had to be transferred to choice A. This vote is still good. We recalculated, and the one with the least votes is eliminated, and then the votes are transferred to the second choice, and vote is still good. Vote transferred to third choice. Vote is still good. Total recalculated, and so forth. You're still with me, right? This all makes perfect sense. No, it doesn't. It's not an improvement on one person, one vote. It's a complication, and it's intended to be complicated because with that complication, there are ways that it can be delayed. It takes longer to get the results. It takes expense to revamp the voting system, to count the votes and retabulate it. Look, if you have something that's working, don't fix it until it's broken. That's exactly what this open primaries / ranked choice voting / rigged choice voting purports to do. We're going to fix this system until it finally gives us something other than a Republican choice. That's the ultimate goal. By the way, I have to give kudos to Matt Edwards and the Idaho Signal Live video channel on Rumble. If you want to see a truly excellent breakdown of all of the nuances and the ins and outs of this, the live feed that they did yesterday is simply remarkable. And again, that's the Idaho Signal Live on Rumble. Easy to search up. Look for yesterday's one on ranked choice voting. It's seriously one of the best. It's about an hour and change long, but you will get more solid information there from people who really have done the homework. And if you're serious about, vetting this information, I'm not asking you to take my word for it or anybody else's. But if you want to have some really serious food for thought, this would be a great place to do it. All right. One final note. We talk a lot about keeping government within its proper bounds. And one of the places where that really has to happen is with spending. Well, I am pleased to report that the Idaho Freedom Foundation has brought back its 2024 Idaho Report on Government Waste, and it's brought back something else, which I hope will be of interest to you. If you want to see areas where your tax dollars are being spent and wasted, the Pork Report is the place to go. The Idaho Freedom Foundation is bringing back its report on government waste, the Idaho Pork Report, to show you how government agencies fritter away your hard-earned dollars. Now, this looks at all levels of government, including state agencies, counties, cities, and more. So no stone remains unturned. If you want to receive a report or a copy of the report when it's released in the fall, they have a form right there online at idahofreedom.org/24pork/. Pretty easy to get to, but this is the best part. If you know of instances in which there is government waste taking place, you can share your tips. They have a form there at the same webpage, and the Idaho Freedom Foundation researchers will actually do the digging and follow up on it. And by the way, the best government waste reported will earn a lucky tipster an exciting prize to be announced later. And all tipsters, this is a further incentive, will receive a digital copy of the 2024 Pork Report from the Idaho Freedom Foundation. Aren't you glad you at least have some people who are trying to, look out for you and look out for your pocketbook? I mean, it's one thing to trust politicians. Hey, we're just here to give you these blessings. And some of those blessings from the political class, they don't really feel so much like blessings. But that accountability has to come from somewhere. This is one way that you can be a part of it. And if you're aware of government waste, again, go to idahofreedom.org and you can do your part to make sure that we're shining light to prevent things from taking place in the dark or just unnoticed, just out of view, so that we aren't saddled with costs that not only add up for us, but even, for our kids and for their kids, depending on, how free people are spending taxpayer money. Anyway, there you have it. Some good news. A decent legal challenge to the Open Primaries Initiative / rigged choice voting. And of course, the Idaho Pork Report is back. I'm Brian Hyde, and this is Nowhere to Hide.
Press Club or bias all media, newspaper, radio.
To be completely blunt here, Brian, and there are plans to expand
indoctrination.
That's right.
Idahoans are also concerned.
Horror shot.